Hi everyone, let's continue. So talking about parieto-occipito-temporal association area, which is this. So parieto-occipito-temporal association, parietal lobe, temporal lobe, and occipital. So parieto-occipito-temporal association area. That's how you need to memorize the name. And where is this area located? Right here. So it is situated for example, anterior to it is what? Somatosensory area. Posterior to it is the visual cortex, and lateral to it is the auditory cortex. Easy. Now, parieto-occipital-temporal association area, whenever anyone says what are its functions, so there are four. First is it helps with the spatial coordination of the body, so analysis of the spatial coordinates of the body. Then Wernicke's area, which deals with the language comprehension and high intellectual functions. This is the second function. The third function is naming of the objects, and fourth is the angular gyrus, which is visual processing of the words or the reading area, right? The analysis of the spatial coordinates. So basically, this is situated anterior to the somatosensory and posterior to the visual coordinates. So information from the sensory aspect of the body and from the visual aspect of the body, both of that information goes to this area and helps compute all of that information and form the coordinates of the visual, auditory, and body surroundings. And Wernicke's area very important because it deals with the now, where is it situated first of all? So this is your temporal lobe. This is superior temporal sulcus. This is inferior temporal sulcus. This is superior temporal gyrus, middle temporal gyrus, inferior temporal gyrus. So superior temporal gyrus, the posterior part of it is where Wernicke's area is situated. So if anyone asks you, so it's situated in the posterior part of the superior temporal gyrus, and this deals with the higher intellectual functions. Most of the intellectual functions are language based. Now, what does this line mean? That most of the intellectual functions are language based. Now, you need to figure this out and write that down in the comment section that most of the intellectual functions are language based. What does that mean? Next, let's talk about the okay. So Wernicke's area, its function is to comprehend everything. So it's higher intellectual function, very important. These two sentences, if you say, that's more than enough. In detail, we're going to discuss later. Then you have your visual processing of areas. This is very important. This is angular gyrus. Now, angular gyrus is basically also known as the reading area. Now, what it does is that it is situated between the vision and between the vernix. So this basically acts like a bridge. It's going to bring all the information from the vision to the vernix area for the vernix area to comprehend. So it acts like a vision. So it feeds the visual information into the vernix area. This is simple in easiest terms. Now what does it do? It helps with reading. For example, if there's this text written, so it's going to read this, and then that reading from vision is going to be transferred into the vernix. Imagine if there was a person whose vernix area was functioning perfectly fine, but that person's angular gyrus wasn't working, so that person can't read. He can't read. You have to read out the information. So where the auditory stimulus, that information will be fed into his vernix area to be understood. But if the person cannot read, so it means that he cannot understand. He can understand, but he can't read it. So it basically means he's not able to read these words. He doesn't understand that okay, if he cannot read them, so ultimately he won't be able to understand. So you have to convey the information via a different method to him, right? And in some cases, if the visual uh, cortex is also functioning as well as the visual processing of words is also functioning, but the vernix is not functioning, that means that person cannot understand things. So that would be vernix aphasia, right? And if a person's visual processing of word angular gyrus is not functioning, that person has either dyslexia or alexia. Now you may be wondering what's the difference between the two. So alexia is acquired, where so this is acquired, and dyslexia is this is developmental, right? So developmental means this develops. This is basically happens in maybe embryological, uh, stage or maybe later sometime. I mean, when the kid is born, at that time itself, dyslexia can be diagnosed when the person cannot read, when the baby cannot read, right? And alexia can develop later in life because this is acquired. So a person, let's say an adult, he developed some lesion or there was some injury to the angular gyrus, so that person will not be able to read anymore. So this is angular gyrus, very important. So it's basically helps feed the information into the vernix area from the visual cortex. Easy. Now, alexia, and also there's one more term, agraphia, where a person cannot write. And obviously, writing also you can only do. I am only able to write this term when because my body, my brain is able to figure out that okay, these are the letters, this is how it should be written. If my brain cannot do that, so it can't even write, right? So agraphia would be inability to write. Alexia would be inability to read. Then there's an area associated with naming of objects. So this entire thing is only associated with naming objects. So if you want to name something, for example, it's now you may be wondering why is there such a huge area associated just for naming objects? Because for naming of the objects, Also, one more thing, that this there are two things. We have visual and also limbic system. So visual, when you see a person, and also association with emotion. So if you see a person and you have some bad memory, quickly all of those information will be computed together. And the other thing is, why such a large area is associated with naming of objects? Because everything that we do on a daily basis depends on naming of objects. For example, if you want to touch a book, you need to first understand that, oh, okay, this is a book, so this is what I want to touch. If you want to call out a person, you need to understand that, okay, this person is called so and so, and that's how you're going to call them. And if you look at some person passing by and now you want to decide whether you should say hi or not, right, first you should be able to know that, okay, this is the person, her name is so and so, and do I know her? So that's basically naming of object, right? And then only you'll be able to give out your hand gesture and say hi, wave at them, call them, and talk or communicate with them, right? So this is naming of objects. Then prefrontal association area, very important. Prefrontal association area, whenever we think about that, we understand that this is involved in the thoughts, right? So a lot of our thoughts, elaboration of thoughts is done here. But another very critical thing that's done here is planning complex movements. Now you may be wondering that planning of complex movements, oh my god, even prefrontal cortex does that. Yeah, even it does that. As I told you, motor cortex carries out the movements, right? But then you have premotor and you have supplementary movement motor. Both of them also plan the complex movement. Other than that, basal ganglia also plans the complex movement. So everything basically works, it works in conjugation with one another. So planning of the complex movements is also done here, right? And the information, there is a massive subcortical bundle. That bundle basically brings information from the visual aspect, from the parieto-occipital association area, sorry, from the parieto-occipital association area to the prefrontal cortex. So basically, this information comes in this subcortical bundle. And then there is planning of, why do you need this bundle? Because it carries the spatial coordinates of the body information. Based on that, you're going to judge what movement is suitable. And then there'll be planning of complex movements, right? That's done in prefrontal. Other than that, what's done? Elaboration of thoughts. And a very important thing, that the working memory, they're stored. Short-term working memory is also stored in the prefrontal cortex. Done. Then you have Broca's area. Now, Broca's area, it provides the neural circuitry for word formation. Now, where is it situated? It's situated posterior, in the posterior lateral prefrontal cortex and partly in the premotor. So, posterior prefrontal cortex and partly in the premotor area, because premotor area is also here. And now what does this do? Now this is for language comprehension, but this is for word formation. For example, if you're able to speak something, if you want to utter something, let's say I have this smarties, mini smarties box in front of me, I want to say smarties. So all of that laryngeal movement, the mouth movement, the palate and tongue movement, all of that will be controlled by word formation. So for example, if a person's Broca's area is damaged, the person won't be able to speak, right? And he'll have Broca's aphasia, where the person cannot speak. He'll understand everything because Vernix is functioning fine, so he can understand what he's saying, and he will be very agitated and frustrated because he's trying to say something, but he understands everything, but he's not able to take out the word. So he will be really stuttering, and he'll find it difficult to even say apples, right? But of course, if a person's Vernix is damaged, so that person will have expressive or Vernix aphasia. Expressive means that this person is understanding that, oh, I want to say this, but he's not. Sorry, Vernix. If Vernix is damaged, the person is not understanding what he wants to say. So he will be very fluent. So there'll be fluent aphasia. He'll be very fluent in speaking, but whatever he'll saying say will not be making sense. For example, he'll be saying that the rain contains apples and it is falling on the trucks, and the trucks are jumping and the remote is falling and all of that. Oh my God, remote is right in front of me. We spent an hour finding it, and now I just looked at it and it's right in front of me. Lord. Anyways, so the TV remote, by the way, I was talking about. Anyways, moving forward, so this is Broca's and Vernon's. And if there is a damage in both of these, so it will be global aphasia, right? Now they're saying that another interesting thing is that, for example, when a kid is small and he's learning a language, that language will be stored in one of the areas, right? And if simultaneously he's learning another language, it will also be stored within that area itself. But after some time, if for example there's an adult whose first language is, let's say, English, but when he grows up he wants to learn French, so English will be stored in one place and French will be stored in some other place. So there'll be some sort of segregation between the two. But when babies are small and you start teaching them 2 to 3 to 4, you want to make them bilingual, trilingual whatsoever. So all of these languages will be stored in one area, right? Then we have limbic association area. Very easy, limbic association. This is the limbic association area. It's in the anterior pole of the temporal lobe. So this is temporal lobe, and in the anterior pole of the temporal lobe is your limbic association area. Now, limbic association area, it deals with the behaviors, emotions, and motivation. Behavior, emotions, and motivations. So these are three terms that you need to know: behavior, emotions, and motivation. Now, most of the emotional limbic system is going to provide most of the emotional drives for activating other areas. So you need emotional drives for activating other areas, and it also provides motivational drive for the process of learning. For the process of learning, you need motivational drive. For activation of other areas, you need emotional drive. Easy. So this is the function of the limbic association area. An area for recognition of faces is this: a person's area for recognition of faces. If this is damaged, what will happen? The person will suffer from prosopagnosia. Prosopagnosia means the person cannot identify the person who's standing in front of him. So this is because of extensive damage on the medial undersides of the occipital lobes, right? And also along the medioventral surfaces of the temporal lobe. Occipital portion of the facial recognition area is contiguous with the visual cortex. So you can see visual cortex, and its temporal portion is associated with the limbic. So see, as vision and limbic. Why is it important? Because the emotions are going to be coming from here. So whenever you look at that person, emotions will be coming from here, and vision, what you're seeing, will also be coming from here. I hope you're understanding what I'm saying. Next, let's move to comprehensive interpretative function of the posterior superior temporal lobe, vernix area. Now, vernix area, let's come back here. The somatic, visual, and auditory association areas all meet one another in the posterior part of the superior temporal lobe. The superior temporal gyrus, right? Posterior part of the superior temporal gyrus is basically the area of confluence of it's the area of confluence of different sensory interpretative areas. Now you can see somatic is this one, right? So somatic area is also meeting here, then visual area is also meeting here, right? And auditory area is also meeting here. So it's basically an area of confluence of all of these areas. So it's basically different sensory interpretative areas are meeting over here, right? So it's basically a vernix area. We're in the superior temporal gyrus, right? Posterior part of the superior temporal gyrus. Now, this is well developed, vernix area is well developed in the dominant hemisphere. Which is the dominant hemisphere? Dominant hemisphere in almost 95% of people is left hemisphere. So left hemisphere of the brain is dominant, and that's the reason a lot of people write with the right hand, because their left cerebral hemisphere controls the movements of the opposite side of the body. So left hemisphere is the dominant hemisphere, so it's going to control the movement of the right hand of the body, right? But if I question you that there's some people who are left-handed, in them which hemisphere is dominant? In them also left is the dominant. But in very few cases of them, right could be dominant. But in 95% of the people, even left-handed and especially right-handed, the left hemisphere is dominant. And in left hemisphere dominance, what does it mean? It means that their vernix area is largest in the dominant hemisphere, in the left hemisphere, and this is associated with the all of the understanding, interpretative functions, the higher comprehension levels of brain function that we call intelligence, right? And this is known as vernix area or general interpretative area or gnostic area or knowing area or tertiary association area, right? So if a person's vernix area is damaged, he is unable to arrange these words into a coherent thought, and he will be unable to recognize the thought that is conveyed. So this is basically a highly, if for example someone uses an electrode to stimulate this area, so a thought will be generated, but that thought will not just contain visions, it will contain all the senses. It might also contain auditory senses, the senses of smell also in some cases, a lot of the senses. So basically it provides auditory hallucinations. It can also be linked to some specific musical piece, right? All of that. Then angular gyrus, I've already told you, angular gyrus is the reading area. If it is destroyed, the person can still interpret auditory experiences, right? Any information that's fed to the auditory sense, but the stream of visual experiences which have to be passing through this angular gyrus bridge into the vernix area, that visual information cannot pass, so that person will have word blindness. Word blindness is alexia, which is acquired. Dyslexia is not word blindness, it's just difficulty in learning about written language, and it's not complete word blindness. What is complete word blindness? Which is alexia. This is acquired, develops later in life, right? And yeah, that's pretty much it. In the next video, we're going to talk about the concept of dominant hemisphere, and then we'll just look at the clinicals once again, and then we'll be done with this. And then after that, we're going to talk about the corpus callosum and thoughts and memories.